Paul Harris Fellow +1. Tom?
Thank you, Tony. Let us pray silently together according to our individual beliefs. May we be grateful for our food and the fellowship around us. May we be a source of hope for those in need. May we realize that together, in Rotary and through Rotary, we can address problems and needs we could not do alone. May all our works, may they reflect an intentional spirit guided by love and kindness.
Thank you, Tom. And since we're right after the invocation, let's keep in mind our club member and a dear friend of many of ours, Ben Brumley. He's just receiving some treatments right now. If you have questions, his son Mike. Mike, where are you? Thank you, Mike. But we all love Ben. And if you have questions, Mike can answer them for you. Keep him in mind. Drop him a note. And now, Todd Lanham will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. Todd is a commercial insurance advisor for USI Insurance Services, LLC. Todd?
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do.
Is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thanks, Todd. Let's all be seated. It's now time to introduce and welcome our guests. Rotarians, please do so at the front microphone. And while his image is still on mine, Todd Lanham is doing double duty today. He's not just leading us in the pledge and four-way test, but Todd Lanham will be at the What is Rotary table on the other side of that divider. So should you want to learn more about the works that our club is doing, what it means to be a Rotarian, Todd can help you. Ashley.
Hi, President Tony. Ashley Brower with Guthrie Mays. I have a colleague of mine, Tiffany Murray, here with me today.
President Tony, Rick King. I have a friend with me, Kelly Rodman, with me today as well.
Thanks, Rick. Welcome.
President Tony, Mike Cool. A guest of our speaker today is Mike Harmless, and Mike tells me that his wife was executive director of the Rotary Club of Indianapolis for 12 years.
Oh,
so glad to have you with us, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. We're pleased to see guests here today with us. Thank you. It's always a pleasure. All right, quick question. What's happening June 1st and 2nd in Paducah, Kentucky? District Conference, good. I think I heard about 14 or 15 answers. That's correct answers. It will be our District 6710 conference. It'll be 2 days when Rotarians throughout our district will highlight accomplishments both locally and internationally. We'll be providing club awards, training officers, and completing a service project. There's also going to be a special event. This might be a first of its kind. There is going to be a large meeting with non-Rotarians invited. I think 1,000 others are going to be invited to hear a speaker that Zig Ziglar has called the best speaker he's ever seen. And that will be Andy Andrews, who is a New York Times best-selling author and business trainer. So in Sparks next week, you'll see the link by which you can register. We want to be the club that has the highest percentage of members. Let's talk about in future upcoming weeks how we might be able to get down there, carpooling or whatever. You can register today, this afternoon, and we have through April 17th, I believe, to qualify for club gift in terms of the number of pre-registrants. You can register at conference@RotaryDistrict6710.org, and again, that will be in Sparks. Now, for more announcements and acknowledgments, here is our club board member and executive director of our Louisville Zoo, John Walzak. John? And thanks, John, for representing our club at this past Monday's local president's meeting.
Thank you, President Tony. It was my pleasure. So our birthdays for this week are Jim Malloy III, Todd Barron, Kathy Dohoney-Evitz, Jennifer Helgeson, James Crane Jr., Barry Charles Brosh, Paula Grisani, Barbara Collins, Bill Herzl, Ken Middleton, Chandra Gordon, Laura Douglas, and John Hubbock. Let's give them all a round of applause and happy birthday. Our Rotary Mentor Program is recruiting volunteers for their April mentoring sessions. Dates, times, and locations could be found in Sparks or see Walt Kunow to volunteer or want more information. Last call for our Business Synergy event and new member recruiting next Tuesday, April 17th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the George at 42. Valet parking, food, drink, door prizes, got to go for the door prizes, and tours are happening, so register through DAC-DB or via the link in Sparks. The Lifeline Committee's next Louisville Rescue Mission Meal will be held on Wednesday, April 25th. Setup begins at 5:30 p.m. and the dinner is served from 6 to 7 p.m. If you would like to participate by bringing food or helping with serving, please see Larry Sloan right back there waving at you all for more details. This year's Rotary Day at the Downs will be Wednesday, May 2nd, in the Steaks Parlor private dining room and covered patio. Remember and note that the Day at the Downs will serve as our club's meeting that week, so we will not meet on Thursday, May 3rd. For the Rotarians that have registered online and paid for their tickets, please see Kenzie to get your tickets. For those who still need tickets, please register online or call the office. And we have a few save the dates. The 2018 honors flights will be on June 6th and June 27th. The Lifeline Committee is looking for World War II and Korean veterans who would like to participate in the trip, as well as Rotarians to support the Welcome Home festivities. Every service member deserves a thank you and a welcome for their dedication and service to the country. Contact Sophia Fisher or Jerry Martin for more information. Tony, I think that's it. It's back to you.
That's a lot.
All right.
That's a lot. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Very vibrant club. Thank you so much, John, and all. It's now time for some shouts. Congratulations to Jean West Lasavio. Is Jean here today? Many of us have heard that later this month, Jean is going to serve as the local host of Louisville Public Media's and NPR's All Things Considered shift from 3 to 6 on WFPL. That's substantial. That's very, very, very strong. And Jean is certainly the personality to do that well. And speaking of Louisville Public Media, yesterday we had several of our club members who did volunteer at the LPM studios as in helping their telethon, phonathon. Would you please stand if you volunteered so we can express our thanks to you? Excellent. A shout out to our treasurer, Joe Ackerman. Actually, it's for being a dad. Joe has two distinctions. First of all, he's the first club member alphabetically in our club's directory. Check me on that. I believe that's true. But secondly, his son, John, was recently profiled as the first young leader that will be profiled in a 20-session or 20-issue series in Business First. John is CPA, and he's co-founder of, I think, one of the coolest titled blogs or websites. It's called Drunken Money. Drunken Money. And it is a website with blog and podcast and everything dedicated to helping millennials manage their finances. So, Joe, thank you for all that you've done to prepare your son for this endeavor, entrepreneurial endeavor. A shout out and acknowledgement of an important awareness campaign. I'm sure many, if not all, have been aware of this. In past weeks, I've noticed an abundance of airtime and print space, which is increasing attention to the fact that as Derby approaches, human trafficking and slavery are on the increase. So to those of our club members in media of all kinds who are helping to make this awareness happen, thank you very much, because as you know, Rotary's mission number one we're going to eradicate polio. And mission number 2 after that, we need to make sure that with equal vigilance, we eradicate the scourge of human trafficking and slavery. And I know President-elect Berry will be talking more about that during his tenure. Yesterday, our members were involved with the final mentoring session of the year at one of our Rotary Promise High Schools, Iroquois. Shouts out to the mentors. Would you please stand? And I know we have one more. Iroquois, if you were mentoring yesterday or you've mentored, would you please stand? Dick Bryan shared with me only moments ago, really appreciate this, Dick, that Ken Grossman, thank you, Ken, brought ties for all the boys, and Kathy Knotts, thank you, Kathy, brought very special wallets for the girls, so thank you. But even after that, for some of the mentors, their day was not yet over, because then later, yesterday, Wednesday, 4 of them served as judges for the speech contest at the Louisville Suburban Rotary Club. So thank you for the community involvement and activity. Finally, a shout out to President-elect Barry Barker. It's a succinct shout out. Those of you who were last week, you'll recognize 376-4983. Barry's waiting for your call if you want to be placed on a committee, right? Okay, 376-4983. Now, Betty Rousseau is Vice Chancellor for Advancement at Indiana University Southeast, and she will provide this week's announcement from the Foundation Committee. Betty, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So first, let me thank all of you who are already giving to the Rotary Foundation. A couple of weeks ago, we had Greg Yank here who talked to us about the importance of giving and the Rotary Foundation. I hope you enjoyed that. During April, we have an extra incentive to give to the Rotary Foundation. Our club is offering points to help you become a Paul Harris Fellow faster, or to become to get to the next level so you become a Paul Harris Fellow again. Give anywhere from $100 to $500 to the Foundation's annual share program, and you'll receive 1 point for each dollar, doubling the credit that you get from the Foundation. This does not cost our club any money, and there are flyers on your tables today that will tell you exactly how to give and make sure your donation is eligible for the match. So take a look at those and follow the directions so you can become eligible for the match. Again, I want to thank you for all the support that you give to the Rotary Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Our district-wide membership contest is at its halfway point. I'm going to pause for 5 seconds and invite you to reflect upon one person in your circle, personal or professional life, who would be a wonderful candidate for membership in our club. Okay, now keep that person in mind as I share a little bit of information about membership. Number 1, that person that you have in mind still, we just heard an announcement from John moments ago. We have a superlative opportunity to introduce that person to Rotary through the event this Tuesday night, the Business Synergy and New Member event. So before you bring that person Tuesday night, please make sure and reach out to the office so that we know how many to plan for, how many that we need to be feeding and providing refreshment for. But really, consider this the perfect timing for an event where you can introduce someone to all that is Rotary. Call that person with your invitation as soon as you return to your home or office after this meeting today. Now, if the prospective member whom you reach out to says, Tony, give me one good reason why I should join Rotary, you can reply as follows. Well, I'll give you 20 good reasons. Fellowship, business development, personal growth, leadership opportunities, citizenship in my community, citizenship around the world, fun, travel opportunities, entertainment, continuing education, assistance when traveling, family events, cultural awareness, ethical practices, always surrounded by nice people, prestige, commitment to the 4-way test, and the improvement of vocational and communication skills, and then finally, opportunities to serve people in need. And there are more than those 20 as we know, okay? There are 1.2 million Rotarians worldwide, 1,200,000 people of action and integrity who transform lives through our service. 1.2 million is a big number, but it's not big enough. The world needs more Rotarians, one new member at a time. Consider it your personal charge to bring that person to our club. Make sure on our website that you're looking too at qualifications for membership. That can be very, very helpful as you consider members who would, people who would become members in our club. I'm challenging each of us too, also, to bring a prospective new member as a guest at our next 2 meetings. Please reflect upon that person who jumped into your mind 5 minutes ago, excuse me, and be compelled to invite him or her, okay? Let's make this happen. It's not just about winning a district-wide contest. It's about continuing to transform more and more and more lives. Past President and past District Governor Mike Cool will introduce our special speaker today. Mike is a member of the 1912 Society and is also a member of the Paul Harris Society. And he is one of our district's most passionate leaders and examples in working to eradicate polio. Mike?
Thank you, President Tony. It's my pleasure today to introduce Donald Davidson, who serves as historian of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. His biography is in Spark, so I'll add some personal insight from his perspective as an Indianapolis 500 race fan. Donald's first 500 was in 1964. This means he's been to 54 of the 101 runnings of the largest one-day sporting event in the world. And I've heard his voice almost every one of those years because I've been attending myself since 1965, or about 53 races. In the early days of his arrival from England, he amazed racegoers, as he still does today with his knowledge of the race's history. I've heard him on the car radio during traffic jams to join 250,000 of my closest friends as we try to navigate the traffic to get into the track. I've heard him as all 250,000 of us try to leave the track at the same time for an even larger traffic jam. I've heard him during rain delays, which are one of the really exciting things at the race. And I've heard him before the race as the excitement builds for Gentlemen, Start Your Engines. No matter when it's been, his knowledge is outstanding. You can Google his name or look him up on Wikipedia, but he possessed this knowledge when it was either stored in his head or in volumes of books. What today we take for granted on the internet was once much more difficult to possess. A couple of years ago, he was listed as one of the 100 most influential people in the history of the Indianapolis 500. There is another poll that I think is even more important. In that poll, when you remove the drivers at the Indianapolis 500, he was listed as one of the top 10 most influential people in the history of the Indianapolis 500. He's been to 54 500s, I've been to 53. But the significant difference is he paid to get into his first and has been paid to attend the other 53 based on his knowledge. My path is the opposite. My dad paid for my first race, and I've had to pay for the other 52. So please give a warm Rotary welcome to Donald Davidson.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I was thinking earlier as the program was starting, I thought, boy, I wish we had more time with this crowd. And by golly, we picked up 5 minutes from somewhere. So I was planning to talk fast anyway. But honestly, my brain's been going 100 miles an hour ever since we got in here, because I wasn't sure how many race fans or people that were familiar and had their race stories would be here. And I've run into several. And a number of things have sparked off, things that I'd like to remark on that I never dreamed of coming here. And the one that really had me rolling back in my seat was the mention of All Things Considered. And on NPR, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but it was either 1972, 1973 in May. I was a guest on All Things Considered, and NPR had just gone on the air just very shortly before that, and I still remember the music, which was ba 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 ba. Am I singing any naughty kids? Never mind, I won't sing anymore. And also, honestly, I was going to give a trivia question, because I didn't know how many auto race fans were here. And one of my questions was going to be, there's been 3 drivers that we know of from Louisville have driven in the 500, and one of them won. Could you name it? And I thought, I wonder how many people are in that audience that will not know who Danny Sullivan is. Silly me. Because one gentleman said, do you have any Danny Sullivan stories? I thought, oh, yes, I do. And we may get that a little bit later. But anyway, this is a fantastic audience that I'm looking at. We've done quite a few of these, and boy, I wish we had more like this. Well, obviously, we're coming up not too long in the future for the 102nd running of the Indianapolis 500. And I know down in Louisville, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, because you've got an event that's run way many more times than that. But we think it's pretty significant. And in fact, I don't believe that there has been another automobile race in the world that has been held 100 times. And now we're coming up for 102. And so I did go to the Kentucky Derby just one time, long time ago, but when I was there, I noticed so many similarities, and other people had pointed that out. There's a great deal of the same feeling when you go, because on the trip that I made, which I think was 1980, we drove down, and there was some arrangement where we got on a bus at the Holiday Inn, and we were driven out there. And as we're getting closer, and here's the Twin Towers and the Twin Steeples off in the distance, but we're in a residential area. And here's people sitting in their front yards with a piece of cardboard that says park $10 and everything like that. It's the same thing. And just the very fact that this event and this venue was established, and then the community built up around it. That's what happened at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And then also during the singing of my old Kentucky home, and I looked around, and I see the people with their handkerchiefs out. And I thought, yeah, I mean, I don't feel that, but I understand, because it's just like going to the Indianapolis 500, because you've been doing that for your whole life. Many of the people there, they're second, third, fourth, and maybe down here, 5th generation, where that's all you've done for that event. And so what's the magic between the two? I'm going to suggest that it took off early on, and it's the same event at the same venue at approximately the same time every year. And just a little facetious remark here, in the 1970s and early 80s, there was quite a bit of problems with rain at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Some of you may remember that, and the race had to be postponed a day or two. And so I was on a talk program one time and talking about the Kentucky Derby. And they said, has the Kentucky Derby ever been rained out? And I said, no, but it's a lot easier to get it in, because if you get a window, if it's muddy, it doesn't matter, and it only takes 1 minute and 58 seconds. The Indianapolis 500 takes 3.5, 4 hours or whatever. But anyway, a couple of things that I want to draw to your attention, and if I ever stop talking here, we do plan to do some Q&A. And so I've got a couple of disclaimers, but I'll get to that when we, in just a few moments. But there's a new exhibition has just opened at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and one of the gentlemen, when we first came in and were getting registered and everything, he said, I used to live in Albuquerque where the Unsers are so famous. Oh yes, well there's an Unser family exhibit that just opened. There was a soft opening on Monday and then a reception on Tuesday night. And so for the next several months up through October, there's all kinds of Unser family racing cars, winning cars from the 500. They've won 9 500s, so almost 1/10 of all the Indianapolis 500s ever held were won by an Unser. And there's memorabilia and helmets and so on and so forth. That goes up through October, worth a look. Museums open every day except for Christmas Day and Thanksgiving Day. And then also there's, well, we're going to do something here. We have some tickets to give away, but we're not actually going to give them away, and they're not 500 tickets, 500 related. We have a couple of sets of tickets for qualifications, which is the Saturday and Sunday before the race, when the field of 33 is set. And then also the month of May now opens. It used to open on May 1st. We used to have the Kentucky Derby would be going on and the track had already opened, but we're not doing that anymore. But it opens with a road race, it's called the Indy Grand Prix, which is a little misleading because it's not a Formula One race. It's the same cars and drivers that will run in the Indianapolis 500. And so we've got a couple of sets of each, and so what we're going to do here, I am going to pose a trivia question for you, and we'll start out easy and then ramp it up a little bit, and then but please don't yell out the answer, or pardon me, you gentlemen and ladies down here, please don't call out the answer, my partner, Mayor Harmless, the gentleman here with the white shirt, the bow tie, former two-term mayor of Greencastle, Indiana, where DePaul University is, and he's my chauffeur and my valet and so on and so forth. So he has a ticket. So what we'll do, pose the question, don't call out the answer, please, raise your hand, and then we'll pick somebody. So the first one, I love general interest trivia, so we'll start out with, all right, there's been 765 different drivers drive in the Indianapolis 500. How many, hands in the air please, how many drivers in the 500 and 101 running so far with the surname of Smith? Hands in the air please. No hands, no takers. How many Smiths have driven in the Indianapolis 500? I didn't hear the answer. What do you? None is the correct answer. Very good. Now, I mean, is that amazing or what? 765 drivers. There's been 11 by the name of Jones, and there's a bunch of Halls and Hills and Johnsons and Crawfords. How many Smiths? None. I love it. All right, here's another one. Danica Patrick is returning this year, and there have been 9 females driving the Indianapolis 500. A couple of years there were 4 in the same race. Well, this year there will be 2. For the last couple of years there's only been 1. So this is a little heavier duty, but it's got a fun answer. Hands in the air, please, if you can give me the surname of the only female that drove in last year's Indianapolis 500. Hands in the air, please. Oh, all right. Smith. No. No, we've already established that there's been none. Hello? All right, no. What? All right, way in the back. Nope. Oh dear, we may have to give this a... All right, we won't belabor this too long. Anybody got an idea who's the surname of the only female in last year's Indianapolis 500? Well, it's the first time we haven't had an answer for that one. All right. The lady's name was Pippa Mann. So what's the surname of the only female in last year's race? Mann. All right, Jesus. All right, okay, well, let's see. I was going to say ramp it up a bit, but I don't know now. All right, I'll tell you what then. No, I got another one that's local. I've been trying to think how to phrase it, and since that one went down the drain, this one probably will as well. All right, if I give you the name of a person and that would link the Indianapolis 500 with the Kentucky Derby, and the name is Howard B. Keck of the Superior Oil Company. Howard Keck. Does that convey anything to anybody? Gee, we get to take the tickets home. Howard Keck owned the car that won the Indianapolis 500 in 1953 and 54 with Bill Vukovich, which is the name that may I'm getting nodding heads down in the front. And then he also owned a horse named Ferdinand, which won the Derby in 84, I think, with Willie Shoemaker. And a couple of days before the event, it was 30-1, and I think it ended up 18-1. And he's the connection. And we did a little investigation at that time to see if we could find other people who owned an Indianapolis 500 car, win, lose, or draw, that owned a racing car and a Kentucky Derby contestant. And to my surprise, there were none, because I thought in the early days there might have been some wealthy people that had one. But Howard Keck was the only one that owned one of each, and they were both victorious. So, golly, how am I doing, Mayor? There's not a lot of noise coming back on that one. Yeah, well, I don't know now. I don't want to do the next one. That won't get that one. Okay. All right. Dario Franchitti has won the Indianapolis 500 3 times. And we have a lot of fun with that, because a lot of you are probably not familiar with Dario Franchitti. And a question that we do have, not for the prizes, but what is Dario Franchitti's nationality? And it's Scottish. He's of an Italian heritage, and he looks Italian, and he's got an Italian name, but when he speaks, it ain't Italian. Anyway, Dario Franchitti has won the Indianapolis 500 3 times, and so the question is, and it's probably going to be down in the front here, how many times did Dario Franchitti finish in the top 5? How many top finishes for Dario Franchitti? 3. It's 3 is the correct answer. Very good. Because it's oh yeah, we're having don't turn them back in again. We're having hard enough time getting rid of them as it is. No, I think what you did is the same with the Smith question, which is my favorite trivia question of all, because it's got such an amazing answer, is that you probably figured out by logic, because why would I be asking if it was 17 or 11 or something like that? But anyway, how many tickets have we got left? Yeah, all right. And I don't know where to go. I've got to do an easy one now, but I don't even. I can't do easy ones. I like the tricky ones.
The last American to win.
Well, they won't get that. All right. All right. And again, all right, Mayor, you're the boss. We're probably down in the front here. Who was the last American driver to win the Indianapolis 500? Yes, sir. Yes. What? Yeah, Alexander Rossi in 2016. Thank God for that. We got him? Oh, we got another set? Oh, my God. All right, then. Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. All right. Can you name... If anybody was lip reading, that probably wasn't a good thing. All right, there's a driver who has a Kentucky Derby connection who was the first person to win the Indianapolis 500 4 times. So who's the first 4 times? Yes, hand in the back, sir. A.J. Foyt is correct. And I fudged a little bit on that one because Foyt's connection with the Kentucky Derby is that he's had horses participate in the supporting events, but never in the Derby itself. Anyway, I think this point now, I'm going to throw it open to questions and answers, and I really appreciate the fact that you gave us a little extra time over what we were anticipating. And so I'm going to entertain questions that you may have, but disclaimers. I'm not into controversy. There's been a lot of it, and that's all anybody seems to want to talk about. And I'm not a gearhead, and I'm not about opinions on where we are now or where we're going or what's going to happen in 5 years. I'm about the people. I'm passionate about the human beings and the great stories that have happened in the past, and so I'm really about the people. So if you'd like to ask me for profiles, and not necessarily the drivers, but some of the other people that have been involved, that's what I really like to talk about. So anyway, the first question.
Thank you for coming. Robert English with Vans Insurance. Question is, what's your favorite race of all time?
Oh, my favorite race of all time? Boy, that would be a toughie. I think my most defining moment, I suppose, was when I first walked into the track, when I had been dreaming of going to the Indianapolis 500 for 7 or 8 years, growing up, born and raised in England, finding out about this strange event that is not a road course, but you just keep going around and around in circles, but with the names fascinated me, and I started reading about it, which was difficult to get information, and then just absorbing the material and finding out that I could read the stats and retain them. It didn't work for schoolwork. It only worked for things that I was interested in, and I've been given credit for having a photographic memory. And what I have, I'm told, is selective, retentive, easy access, and which means, I tell people, that means I have the ability to memorize stuff that doesn't matter. And when people have said I was wasting my time doing it, I should concentrate on schoolwork, it ended up I made a career out of it. And when people say, Donald, you've got to move on. You can't keep living in the past. Yes, you can. They pay me to do that. So it's worked out great. So I would say that my defining moment was when I arrived at the track. And I remember when I came down from Chicago on a Greyhound bus and stopped at Kentland. I don't know if anybody remembers that run, the post house at Kentland. But anyway, then had to get on the right bus to go out to the track. And I mention this because I asked the bus driver, and several of the people on the bus were talking to me on the way out. And I said, please make sure I get off at the stop where you go to the track, because I thought that you get off and then have to walk. Like if you go out to Wembley Stadium by tube, and you go on the underground, when you get off at the Wembley station and you get off, you're not at Wembley Stadium yet. It's way off in the distance. So I didn't want to miss it. And then, by golly, I come through the underpass and up the other side, which a number of you have done, and the grandstands are right next to the track, which has brought back the memories when I went to the Kentucky Derby, and I thought, golly, it's right there. So anyway, just walking in and then seeing the people and seeing the cars that I had read about and seen in photographs and films, and then almost immediately the opportunity to meet with them and have them be so friendly and immediately take me into their inner circle. I mean, that's got to be, I mean, I've had thousands and thousands of pinch me moments over the years, and but that's got to be the all-time topper. So
Dick?
I didn't really answer your question. I have a favorite race, not really, but 64 coming in the gate the first time.
In 1961, when I was 3 years old and a senior in high school, Nobody's listening to me, or I would have got a little laugh out of that, right? I'm Dick Bryan, and Eddie Sachs came to my high school in Rochester, New York, and gave a talk to the whole school.
Yes.
And it was awesome. I mean, it sold everybody on being a Indy 500 or Indy car in general fan. It was awesome. Unfortunately, Eddie 3 years later was in a fatal crash.
Right.
But he sold us, and I became a fan at that very time. With the enormous celebrity of the drivers in today's world, are they still doing things like that, trying to bring the youngsters into being fans instead of just us old folk?
All right, thank you. Very good question. I didn't know where you were going with that, and I did meet Eddie Sachs just a few days before his demise. Anyway, no, there was for a number of years the Champion Spark Plug Company had, and I don't know if this will compute with anybody here, but for a number of years they had a thing called the Highway Safety Patrol. And it was Indianapolis 500 drivers would go out and speak to, they started with schools and they ended up doing military bases and everything, but they would go to the schools and talk to the kids about safe driving tips rather. And there were 500 winners in there and notable, names of the day. And that was a hugely successful program. And I've actually been with some drivers where an adult will come up and say, "Excuse me, I remember when you came to my high school in St. Louis and talked to us and everything." So it does have a lasting effect. And that yes, the drivers still do the visits. And Mayor Harmless and I were privileged to be part of one just a couple of weeks ago. There's a town called Rushville, Indiana, and that's where Tony Stewart lived for a while. And in fact, where the current mayor of Indianapolis is a Rushville native. Anyway, we went down there and spoke to the elementary school, and they have 650 students total in that system, and I think we had 600 in the gymnasium and about 75 adults that were teachers, the bus drivers, and some parents and so on and forth. So we figured we had 675, and we went with Charlie Kimball, who's a current Indianapolis 500 driver and finished third a couple of years ago, and he connected with those kids. He is diabetic. And he is the first driver to drive in the Indianapolis 500 legally as a diabetic, because there's been a few that snuck in when one could do such things and sneak it past the medics. But anyway, now, so he's actually diabetic and has the ability to give himself an injection while the race is on if he feels the need. And so that's part of his message. Very, very well spoken. I think he went to Stanford. His dad went, and I think he did as well. So college-educated fellow driving in the 500. And so when we got there a little early, we went through to talk to, I think, 3 or 4 kindergarten classes, these little kids, and he was able to talk to them on their level, talk to the teachers on their level, and then we even went to a special needs class where we had kids sitting in wheelchairs and so forth that probably were not destined to have a great life. And Charlie would talk to them. And then when we went out into the main auditorium, and he addressed the diabetic situation. And he did it in such a subtle way, because instead of saying, how many of you here are diabetic, which could have been embarrassing, he said, how many of you here have a family member or a friend or a relative that is diabetic? And we were amazed at probably 60-70% of the hands went up. Anyway, he spoke to them, and then after that was over, the teachers had they were actually like big wheel tricycles, and they had a couple of heats and a feature, and they were knocking each other off the track and everything. And he checkered flagged that, well, greened and checkered it. But anyway, the point is that the impact that he made, that when we came out of there, all of the teachers were thanking us, and the parents were thanking us, and the impact that he had. Now, a lot of the kids went to the race anyway, and sorry for the long answer here, but it wasn't like they were all new. A lot of them, we said, how many go to the race? And many hands went up. But the fact that he went to their school and spoke to them pretty much on their level, I mean, he got hundreds of race fans in that one visit. So yes, they still do that, and it's very effective, and that's why we enjoy doing this, because and again, this is beyond what you're asking, but it's so effective. And I've been doing talks for decades. I've done them in Louisville a long time ago, but with all of the PR and the publicity and the campaigns and the advertising and everything like that, what the track has come back to us and said, the most effective thing that anybody's doing is you guys going out and talking to individuals, talk to the groups. So we do the schools and we do groups like this, and it's very effective and very, very rewarding, because I have the passion, and I would have the passion anyway, but it's so great to be able to share it. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing. My name's Larry Sloan, and I grew up in Indianapolis, and I met you downstairs when you came in, and I started going to the race the same year you did, and sat right in front of that terrible accident when it occurred. My question, though, is about a personality that I'm kind of interested in. Andy Granatelli was a famous car owner, and I think he was a driver before that, and he owned STP. I think his brother and he, or maybe something like that. And I just wondered about his, what has happened to him, and if you want to tell any anecdotes about Andy Granatelli. He was an innovator. I think he supported the Novi maybe, and he also supported the turbine car. Right. So maybe a little
Yes,
bit.
he's asking about Andy Granatelli, who was the most fabulous showman that the track has ever had, and not everybody cared for him because he was a little outlandish and a shameless publicity seeker, but very, very effective. And he was from Chicago. He was actually born in Texas, but they grew up on the north side of Chicago. And he was the middle of three brothers, and then they were involved in the hot rod business right after the war. They already had a company called Grankor Automotive, which was Granatelli Corporation, and they had these, they would sell high-performance equipment so that you could build a hot rod or convert a car into a hot rod. And there's rumors that they may have had some clients on the north side of Chicago that they helped enhance the performance of their street cars, and whether that's true or not, he never did anything to say that it wasn't. But he was a driver, very briefly. He actually attempted to qualify for the Indianapolis 500 in 1948, but had an accident on the qualifying run. But when he really came into his own was in the late 50s, around 1960, he became involved with a company. It's a little complicated business deal, but it ended up that he became part of the Studebaker Corporation when it was just dying away. And they had a product that was part of the conglomerate that was called STP, which stood for Scientifically Treated Petroleum. And it had been invented by a German, and I guess it had sat there for a while and never really done much. And they said to him, why don't you see if you can sell this thing? So when he said that he was the owner of STP, he was actually the president of the STP Corporation, but there was a connection with Studebaker. And in the final days of Studebaker, he was able to get a great deal of publicity by fielding Studebaker passenger cars in long-distance record runs, both at the Bonneville Salt Flats and then also from coast to coast, and he was always a great publicity seeker. And then he sponsored the race cars and was able to get a lot of attention that way. But he was a very flamboyant character. I mean, he was described as looking like Diamond Jim Brady, and he was rotund would wear a white raincoat or a light-colored raincoat. That was sort of kind of synonymous with him for a while. But he was a tremendous publicity seeker, and probably one of the most effective things that he did was no sooner had he started to sell STP than he had this brilliant idea, and he bought an ad in Hot Rod magazine, which was very expensive to do, but inside the front cover of Hot Rod magazine, which had a circulation of like 2 million or something, a pocket was inside the front cover, and in the pocket was 1 or 2 STP decals. Now, not the ones that you soaked in water, but the peel back. And that was new, I don't know if you'd say new technology, but that was a sort of the beginning of the peel back decals. And his thinking was, you open the packet, and then here's the decal. What do you do with it? Well, you stick it on something. And so kids would put them on the bicycles, and it wasn't long before they were all over the world. And I can tell you that I had an amazing experience in 1976 when I was on a trip for 3.5 months, and I was the official on a team of 2 automobiles that were driven around the world. Well, that's not possible, but we did go from the United States down through Central and South America, Santiago and Chile, across the Andes, up the other side to Rio de Janeiro, and then we flew to Casablanca, and then took a ferry across the Straits of Gibraltar, and then we drove from the south coast of Spain all the way over to Bombay, drove the whole way. And so the point is that I think we were in Afghanistan or somewhere, I mean some outpost where it was just mountains and dirt roads, and we were following a truck that was belching all kinds of smoke, and on the back of the transmission case was an STP decal. So, you know, I mean, that was a long story. I just wanted to show off the fact that I'd been to 32 countries, but we saw STP cows everywhere. And so it was fantastic publicity. And then he did another great smart thing, which was to sponsor or be a sponsor of The Tonight Show. And so he was frequently on as a guest with Carson, but he would have with him Mario Andretti or Rocky Marciano, and he would have all these great guests, and then he invited Johnny Carson to the track. And I don't want to get into talking about the turbine, but the Parnelli Jones turbine in 1967 ran some laps in, I think, like late September, early October, with Johnny Carson. Actually took laps in the turbine, and I think he was probably one of maybe 4 people that ever drove that car. But anyway, a lot of people thought that Andy was a huckster, but he was a lovable guy, very generous, and sort of was oh my goodness me, that's not a good sign. Oh, I don't like that. The bell's going to clang.
We just have 1 more minute left. I wanted to get one more
bell
question.
and a hammer. I didn't do any of my Danny Sullivan stories yet. But anyway, Andy and our family, he was very good to us, and just that a lot of people thought that, you know, they didn't care to have him around, but his impact on racing out to the general public, and the attention that he got to bring people in through whatever he was doing. But if they became a race fan, then that was a good thing. And so I think that when we're talking about the most important people in the history of the Indianapolis 500, I would say that not the most important, but I think when you're stretching it to maybe 12, 13, 14 people, Andy Granatelli has to be one of those.
Jerry, final question. We have about a minute left.
Quick question. I'm Jerry Martin. The Kentucky Derby, as you're probably aware, is owned by a publicly held company, and its investor owned the track and the Derby. who owns the Indianapolis 500 and the racetrack now? I remember in years past, there was a family that was involved in it. Who owns it now, and how do you make money if you don't get to bet on the cars?
All right, well, unfortunately, I've only got a couple of minutes to answer that, but the amazing thing is that it's owned, when you come right down, it's the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Corporation. When you come right down to it, it's a family from Terre Haute, and it's the third ownership. There's the Carl Fisher, Jim Allison group, with a couple of others, that was the original owner, and from 1927 to 45 it was owned by a group that was headed up by Eddie Rickenbacker, the World War I flying ace, who actually had driven in the 500 before World War I, which is another bit of neat trivia. But in 1945, and believe me, this is the short version, it came to pass that Rickenbacker sold it to Anton Holman Jr. of Terre Haute. And to this day, when you come right down to it, it's a family from Terre Haute that owns it. And so, golly, I still didn't get to tell my Danny Sullivan stories. But anyway, if we're wrapping up here, let me just say this, that I know the bell clangs at 12:59:50 or something like that. When we're done, I'm happy to do one-on-ones, or for those of you that don't have to leave right away, I would be very happy to continue on and talk to you and hear your stories. I'm always learning something. But thank you for having us down here, and by golly, come on up to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this May.
Donald Davidson.
Thank you.
Okay, two quick announcements. First of all, next week we had scheduled for Governor Bevin to attend, and we received word that he has to cancel. So he will not be presenting to our club next week for the State of the Commonwealth address. But kudos to our Speakers Committee and Julie Schmidt. They're working feverishly to bring someone in from Frankfurt who can speak to us about all of those important issues that are currently being discussed and voted on and so forth. Second announcement, reminder to board members that we have a full board meeting, and that will be Monday 11:30 at the DePaul School. Mr. Davidson, thank you very much, very much. And Mayor, thank you as well for being with us today. This meeting is adjourned.